Welcome to this week's Rob's Country. We're going to be looking at a disease that's hitting cattle, and it's caused by a tick, and it's ravishing through the whole place. It's absolutely destroying herds. We're also going to be looking at our update on our paddock of lucerne. It's able to make 5-acre block into a $10,000 a year income. But first of all, IRD payments is a different way of doing them now?
Yeah, on the 1st of October, there's some big changes coming up. We signalled it a few weeks ago. Accountants are sort of out there now making sure everyone's aware that you can no longer go into the Westpac and pay your tax from that date onwards. You can only either pay online or pay by cheque. And if you are paying by cheque, it's got to be received at IRD on or before the due date. So at the moment, your farmers will wait till the last day. They put in the mail at the postie and hope that it gets there on time. You do that and you're late. So they'll ping you for some penalty.
Yeah, and they do.
Yeah.
So cheque or online, we really are going electronic.
We are, yeah. Eventually we're going to be going that way. But if you are paying by cheque, you should allow 3 to 4 days at least, especially with the rural post, etc., just to make sure that you're not going to fall foul of those new rules.
Is that going to be tough? I suppose not really for many people who don't have a cheque account or who don't do it by electronic, because a lot of people in the country, of course, don't have broadband like we do.
Yeah, so they're going to have to be very well prepared. They will eventually going to have to think about online. Whether that means a trip into town or something like that, I don't know, but it is going to end up that way.
Bring on the broadband, Kerry.
Exactly, yes, they desperately need it.
Now, tax schemes?
Yeah, well, there's actually been a couple of tax schemes that have gone before the courts, and the message basically is that IRD are going to get you if you try it on with them. The first was there was a guy up in the North Island, he used a false name, declared that he had several kids and claimed 6 years of working for families tax credits. So he claimed $120,000 worth of refunds that he wasn't actually entitled to. The IRD investigated, got him, and he's now serving a year and I think it's 4 months in jail for that one. And the other...
Boy, is he a marked man from here on out.
Yeah, he's going to, yeah, they'll always be watching his file from now on. So he'll have to be squeaky clean. Any little mistake and they'll be onto him. And the other one is that, the phone scams where they ring up saying they're IRD. There's a woman up in the North Island, the syndicate head, so she had a lot of people doing it for her. She's been jailed for just on 4 years after ripping off $1 million from taxpayers.
$250,000 a year, that's not a bad income.
Yes.
Or does she have to pay it back?
I guess she'll have to pay it back, I'm not quite sure. There's no sort of decision on that.
But they did get her.
Yeah, they said, if you try and rip us off, our systems are smart enough to pick it up. She did get $1 million before they picked her up though, so there's a little bit of a concern there, but the system was smart enough to capture her. But also tied in with that, there's already been 18 other people that have been prosecuted in regards to this case, and they're all facing some sort of a sentence. So that's 19 people involved in a phone scam that netted $1 million.
Oof, well, you talked about it on this program.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you a wee bit about this being a marked person, because if you do take them on, and I mean they are obviously going to say, excuse me, there's a wee red flag that pops up on the computer.
Yeah, they say there's not, but it's pretty clear that if you...
Well, you think it would make sense.
Yeah, if you've done something in the past that's not quite above board, you will be watched. And they'll watch every aspect of tax that you're involved in. So if you've done something wrong with the GST and they've caught you there once, they'll always watch that, but then they'll keep an eye on your income tax, your PAYE, anything else that you're involved with.
Kerry, to me, it's a wee bit like the spying thing. I mean, I would rather that they were really tough on everybody who's breaking the rules, so that I don't have to carry them because I have to pay extra.
Exactly, yeah, and that's what we all want. As accountants, we want everyone to pay obviously their fair share. You've got to work within the rules, and they can be pushed and prodded here, there, and everywhere. But
because I have to make up any downfall if somebody else is taking $1 million out of them.
So therefore, it comes out of somebody else's pocket. So they've been pretty proactive, and they really are starting to get out there. We've seen a lot of letters come in for just doing general reviews of GST saying, look, you've had a couple of refunds the last 3 or 4 months that you never normally have. Please provide evidence of why. So they're actually starting to really tighten up, which is a result of the funding that they've been given, the extra amount in the last couple of years.
And rightly so. Something about a Taranaki farmer.
Yes, there's a guy going up around the Taranaki that was offering his services as a farmhand, and he approached this couple, said he wanted to work for them, and he said, I'll just do it on the shake of a hand, you don't need any proper paperwork or whatever. These guys were smart enough, they got in contact with Federated Farmers, got their employment agreements and actually signed them up. He did try to change some clauses, but they didn't allow it. He was actually finished with them within 4.5 days because he didn't do a few things right. And as he left, he said, this is going to cost you, hoping that he could go for them for a summary dismissal and obviously clean out their bank account a bit by getting some penalties and fines and costs awarded against them. But because they had a written employment agreement, he had no grounds. Basically, they'd done everything above board and followed the right procedures. So there's a real warning there for farmers that you need to do the right thing or it could be costly.
Well, I mean, it's stupidity if you don't.
Yeah, and this guy, he had obviously studied up on it. He knew what he was doing.
Those sorts of people do know.
Yeah, so yeah, just watch out if they're out and about doing it.
Thank you very much indeed. After the break, we're going to be talking to John Wally, and that's always very good information. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Well, we've got to start off, I suppose, really with the sort of the Americans coming down here and telling us.
How can you avoid it? I mean, it was there larger than life, and I think that we all saw the Snowden stuff as a North American Snowden discussion, but it's quite clear how much more it widens. Add that to dirty politics, and you think, you know, is this an election or is this something else? Now, I think that maybe John Key made a mistake. When dirty politics came out, I think I would have stood up and said, look, this is an election. An election's important. This is also important. After the election, if we're in government, we'll do a full Royal Commission on the thing, take all the sting out of it, deal with it later. Instead of the sort of, trust me, it's okay. And once you get into the secrets frame, trust me, it's okay, tends not to be a response that plays that well, you know. And we saw in your previous interview that you'll be watched if you start to make mistakes. And then the question is, who's doing the watching?
Well, in that case, IRD, but who do they use? Is that what you're saying?
Could be all sorts of people watching. We don't know.
We
don't know. That's right. But I think the worry's overblown. But you know, we might trust who we've got at the moment, and at some point in the future, you might take a different view.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. Now, bearing in mind that some people will be watching this before the election and some will be watching it afterwards, where are we at?
Well, I think if you take the mainstream media, they're basically saying it's a foregone conclusion. There's a sort of a centre-right coalition involving New Zealand First National and the people on the more extreme right. Some of the proxies for that type of prediction, the power company share prices are lifting today, which indicates that some investors think that NZ Power doesn't look like it's going to happen. If you look at the social media, and I carefully balance my tweet feed, and for those viewers who don't understand what that is, don't worry about it. but this is people commenting on Twitter, and I'm seeing the social media not really following the mainstream. So a centre-left coalition could be a possibility, but I think if you were picking it right now when you were going with the short odds, you go centre-right.
I mean, seriously, is it that close at the moment?
I think it's closer than the polls take it, say it is. What we don't see a lot of is just how big the undecided group is. And we were talking this morning, we think the undecided group's somewhere between 10 and 15% of the vote. Well, that's a big difference when you're really talking about a few percent either side, whether it's a right-leaning or a left-leaning coalition that forms the biggest group.
As manufacturers and exporters, how many of the voters understand what's going to happen to your members if there is a change of government or if there isn't?
Well, I couldn't really answer that. There is certainly, for the first time in 30 years, a policy difference, particularly our monetary policy, industrial policy. That's a long way away from where most people live, and that's the area that, with my current hat on, I tend to talk about all the time. And certainly Labour has come to the electorate with an upgraded industrial policy and, I believe, an improved monetary policy as far as manufacturing, the productive sector and exporting goes, at least.
So, but I mean, not too many people would understand as well as you do.
No, that's right. I mean,
is that the media's problem?
I think it's that we frame the debates like we have the leaders' debate, and we ask afterwards who won or who lost. Mightn't it be better to ask who explained what their policies were best?
You mean debate by these shouting matches, don't you?
They do away with that. Well, they weren't all shouting matches. Remember, Parker and English, both men I respect a lot, did a really good job on their debate. They respected the other person, they didn't talk over one another, and they made some effort to explain the positions they were taking. And I think that deserves some respect. But the idea that we set it up as a contest to begin with actually begs the sort of behaviour I don't think many people like.
Yeah, that's fine. Where's the future for New Zealand, do you think, at the moment?
Well, I think the future is added value. If we don't move down that track of adding value, then ultimately we live beyond our means, we sell assets, and the end trajectory of that is we own nothing and we're tenants in our own country.
Very briefly, I understand Bill English is wandering around with a big grin all over his face because as of March you won't be in your role currently.
Well, again, Bill and I take a different view. I respect his position, I respect his analysis, I just don't agree with it. And I hope he feels the same in the other direction. But as March goes, I'm stepping down as CEO of the association. That doesn't mean I'm going to step out of commenting, and if you have me, I'll still be back here, maybe taking a broader view of things I have to say.
John Wally, I shall look forward to that. So as of March, you'll be stepping down. Big shoes to fill.
As of March next year, yeah.
You keep in touch because we need you. Now, cattle, there's a new disease that's happening and it's very, very unpleasant.
We've got a new disease called Theileria, and we've had a new strain of Theileria called Ikeda, which has appeared in Northland since August 2012, and it's been affecting a large number of North Island herds up to this point. And there has been one case in Rangiora, which was just affecting one animal that was brought down. So it is a disease that we could see coming down into the South Island, especially into tick-affected areas. So Theileria is a disease of cattle that's transmitted by ticks, and you need ticks to transmit the infection. And the infection affects the red blood cells, and they get damaged and pulled out of the circulation, and cows will suddenly go very anemic and very slow. So it's a bit like climbing Mount Everest at altitude.
Without oxygen.
Without oxygen, that's it. So cows just don't have the energy, so they might be very slow, lethargic, and they might come into the shed with pale udders. And if you look in the gums or in the vulva, you'll see that instead of being a nice pink colour, they've gone very pale, or they may go yellow and jaundiced in colour as well.
So the secret would be tick control, I guess?
So tick control is part of the ongoing process. Unfortunately, it only takes one infected tick to transmit the disease, and tick control, if it's not 100%, isn't going to prevent it. So what we've found in North Island herds is that tick control can slow the process down, but it will not prevent infection occurring if you've got infected cattle coming in and you've got a tick population on the farm in that situation.
Neil, the first thought is dairying because you're on a dairy farm,
Yep.
But what about beef cattle?
Yeah, so with beef cattle, what's been happening there is we've been getting 6 to 10 week old beef calves affected. So generally speaking, adults haven't been affected, but we have had 6 to 10 week old beef calves that have gone very pale, lifeless, collapsed, or just even found dead. So if you're a beef farmer and you find calves dead or collapsed, Theileria could be a possibility. So, get your vet in, get them to check out the affected animals.
And obviously, it is very, very serious. I mean, you don't get a slight case of that.
Yeah, so with Theileria, we see the whole gamut from very mild on some farms to very severe on other farms, and there's a whole lot of factors that come into that. If we've got naive, unexposed animals going into a high tick area, so animals, say in the south of the North Island moving up to Northland, we find in that situation those animals can, especially if it's around calving time and the start of lactation, they can be very severely affected, and we can get large numbers affected. Other farms can maybe just get 1 or 2 clinical cases. They might just see the odd cow affected, and other farms might actually have the infection but don't even see any clinical cases. So generally we see animals that are in good condition. They will have the disease to a milder extent. And so if they're well fed, good condition, not under too much stress, then their immune system will work much better.
Because it's interesting you said stress. That was going to be my next question.
Yep.
It seems linked to stress.
Yes, so stress is an important sort of factor in the disease, and we've got this sort of the stress of calving and the stress of early lactation will lower the immune system in the cow, and infections at that time can be quite severe. And we've had the same thing in autumn calving herds, where autumn calving herds around calving, if they're affected, can have severe problems with it. You can have cows that go down with it, and if it's around calving, they might get treated with calcium for milk fever, but they're actually non-responsive to calcium. So if you've got any cows going down that aren't responding to calcium, have a look at the gums, get your vet to check them out, because again, that could be a case of Theileria infection. So treatment, there's unfortunately no vaccines available out there, and there's unlikely to be any vaccine for quite a while. The best treatment is blood transfusion in severely affected animals, and a lot of vet practices have got these down pat now and got blood transfusion kits. And basically we collect 5 litres of blood from a normal healthy cow, and we transfuse that straight into a sick cow with Theileria, and that can have very dramatic results. Those cows will pick up within a few hours, and we have a good success rate with those. There are other specific Theileria treatments, but unfortunately they have very long milk withholds. The present one has got a milk withhold of 43 days, and they've got meat withhold of 180 days plus, which that one might be even going up to 18 months. So the residue issue with those drugs makes it that the specific anti-Theilerial drugs such as BBQ probably won't be used very much due to those residue issues that we have to control.
Your blood transfusions, do cows all have the one blood type?
And cows have lots and lots of different blood types, so that's a really good question to ask. So a one transfusion seems to go really well. There certainly is the potential for a transfusion reaction, especially if you're doing a second, third, fourth transfusion. So with the economics and the practicalities of blood group typing, generally we just do a transfusion without blood typing, and if it's a one-off transfusion, 5 litres of blood, very, very little problems involved.
I guess 2 major points, loss of income and production, and also hits fertility.
Yes, so unfortunately, if your herd does get affected, you get lost milk production. Your reproduction, getting cows back in calf, could be affected, and obviously if there's any cow deaths, that hits the bottom line as well. So farmers in the North Island, some have had a few losses of a few $1,000s, and others have had losses that could add up to $50,000, $100,000. So the potential losses from a severe Theileria infection are severe.
And it's heading south.
And it's got the potential to sort of come down here. As I mentioned before, we've got tick populations in Golden Bay, Tartica, Blenheim areas, and if the infected cattle are brought down to those areas, then it's got the potential to get established. We've got 1 or 2 areas down the west coast and also southeast Southland where conditions are actually favourable, and ticks have got the potential to get established there. So if those ticks are transported down in livestock, there is the potential for those areas to develop a tick population. And then if we've got infected cattle brought into those areas, Tyleria could potentially get established in the South Island as well.
It's sort of like you're going to have an anti-tick thing, like you got an anti-TB thing.
Yes, so it's really important with any of these diseases, TB, Tyleria, BVD, Johne's disease, to have good farm biosecurity. So any animals that you're buying in, you want to know what their history is, what their background is, do disease checks on them, talk to your veterinarian about what those risks are. And animals coming from different parts of the country pose potentially different risks. So the other message we'd really like to get across is if you're moving any cattle north, so any cattle going from the South Island up to the north, so going to infected areas that have got Tyleria, such as North Waikato, Northland, those cattle are potentially a very severe risk of getting a severe Tyleria infection, especially if they're trucked around about that 1st of June in a heavily pregnant condition. Then the stress and the challenge of infection up there could potentially be more severe than if they're just going to a sort of marginally endemic infected area.
So please keep an eye out for that, and that's a very, very important message from MPI. After the break, it's a case of as is, where is, A, what does it mean, and B, the minefield that you're walking into. Welcome back to Rob's Country. As is, where is. We know about cars, but what about buildings and such?
Well, as is, where is something we're seeing a lot more of in Christchurch at the moment. And basically it's where you've got a property, that property's been damaged in the earthquakes, the owners then settle with EQC and with their insurer, but rather than taking that money and using it to remediate the property, they're saying, well, we think that it's too much money, we're going to keep those funds, and we're then going to sell the property on the market, just as is, where is, take it as it comes, knowing that it won't be insured or capable of being insured.
And I guess there's other buildings around the countryside, apart from earthquake ones, were dilapidated, and you could do the same?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have a contract if you do that?
You do. I mean, when you're purchasing most properties, then you'll have an agreement for sale and purchase of real estate. There's a standard form for that. There's some variations, but it's from the standard form, but it's uncommon. In this one, this is one of those instances where there are some changes to the agreement. The main change is that the vendor will normally say, I'm representing to you, the purchaser, that the property is of this certain standard, it has all of its consents, it's not going to blow over in the wind, all of those sort of things. In this agreement, all of those are stripped out. They're just saying, we make no representation whatsoever, here's the property, take it or leave it.
So any demolition is on the person who's bought it?
Yes, that's an important consideration. When you're looking at the agreement, it's very important to make sure that in that agreement it will say the vendor does not require the property to be destroyed or taken down. They've had an agreement with their insurer, and that agreement and final settlement does not cover off any requirement to destroy it.
Matt, there's a lot could go wrong.
There is, absolutely. I mean, there are high rewards, that being said, but with any investment where there's high rewards, that naturally is married up with some high risk.
You're not the first person to have said, if it looks that good, it probably isn't.
That's right. But the rewards can be substantial. I mean, you're looking at properties which would normally be sold for, let's say, $500,000. Then you found out that, okay, you're not selling it for the value of the home, you're selling it essentially for the land value and a little bit extra to account for the market demand for these properties, which is increasing.
So basically, you've got to look at the value of the land, work that out somehow, and then you've got to work out about how to clear the site, and then you've got to look at working at anything else that could come in.
That's right. Well, one option is, yes, you could clear the site, but often that's not what happens. What could happen is that just because you can't get insurance on the property, just because you bought it without any representation from the vendor, is not to say that you can't rent it out. Now, you've bought it at a substantial discount. That's not to say you necessarily have to rent it at a discount as well. So the return you're getting on investment is much higher. That's one option. The other option is you're buying it thinking, oh well, I can't get insurance for the property, that's okay, I'm going to go and assess what needs to be done to get it up to standard where the insurer will insure it, and then suddenly you've turned something you bought for this value into this value and you sell it off, and that might happen down the track.
Sort of like playing the futures market, because you say, well, I'll put a whole lot of money into this business, and then the insurance company may.
They may, that's right, that's a big may. And that's why, as I've said, there are large rewards, but there's also large risks. We don't know what stance an insurer will take beforehand. That's something that a prospective purchaser really should look into. We also don't know what will happen if there's another major earthquake event. I mean, in the past, let's look at that red zone area, then we have a situation where, well,
anything could happen, couldn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, bottom line is that we don't know.
That's
so
right.
That, hence my comment about the futures
before the
market.
government has gone in there and said, okay, look, we realise you in the red zone have not been able to move on with your lives with this, so we're going to offer you some money to help compensate you for this situation. That's unlikely to happen in the future, I think, for people that are buying properties with eyes wide open, knowing they can't get insurance. What's more, let's put aside earthquake events for a moment. What happens if there's a fire on the property? Then your place is burned down, you're in trouble. What happens, moreover, if that fire spreads next door and next door burns down? They're going to hold out their hand and say, well, please go to your insurer and give us the money for the damage to our property. And you'll say, well, sorry, I don't have insurance. And then it's your problem.
Because that insurance thing on homes and contents and all that sort of stuff, I mean, that's another minefield. Because as far as I can see, I mean, if you don't have it, you've lost everything.
That's right, you're in big trouble. But as with anything, as I've said before, that's a risk that some people are prepared to take.
So the best bet to do is to make a big list and say this is the pros and this is the cons.
Well, we're seeing a lot of people going in there and saying, okay, we're going to jump right in the deep end, we're going to go out there, we're going to find a property, we're going to go see an agent, and that agent's going to prepare this agreement for us, which will hopefully protect us. It's important to remember that the agent, while they have some requirement to consider what's in your best interests, they really are acting for the vendor at the end of the day. So we recommend don't go out there, don't sign an agreement until you've at least ran it by a solicitor first and got some sound legal advice, making sure that you certainly are protected.
Ooh, thank you very much, because it's a springboard I wouldn't want to jump off. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Now, we've been checking on a paddock of lucerne. It's about 5 acres, and the idea is that it's been in pasture, now it's in oats, and it's going to end up in lucerne. And technically, it should be able to produce about 10 grand a year off 5 acres, because that's a pretty good investment. Let's find out where we're at with Warwick Green.
Well, the oat paddock looks really good. It's progressing as we thought. I mean, we're sort of now early September, so we've probably got another couple of months, not quite, but almost, to get this up to a good sizable crop to make silage off, oat and silage. Couple of things. One, I think we probably should be looking at a bit more nitrogen, maybe another strategic dressing of nitrogen in the next couple of weeks when the soil temperatures warm up a little bit more, and that'll just kick it into gear. I note that obviously with the direct drilling there's actually quite a bit of grass still coming through. We should have killed it all with a Roundup, but of course ryegrass is a persistent blooming weed.
You're saying it's a weed. That's good coming from you.
It's a persistent weed. So what I would do is not panic on that at this stage. It's not going to seed, so let's it's going to, if anything, just bulk up the silage. So let's take it through and then round up it, and then we can go into our lucerne. So, we've only got probably a 20% of grass in here, so it's not too bad.
You said you wanted to put some end on it. It looks pretty patchy to me.
Of course, it's really, part of the problem is it's really only kicked into gear. Temperatures have warmed up, soil temperatures got warm, so away it's going. But you're right, my own view would be that we probably need to put on sort of 50 to 60 units of N. That's what I'll be putting on.
I understand that the lime was going to be put on in 2 different lots so that it
That's
wasn't
fine.
too heavy.
That's good as gold, and I mean the lime, and I mean that will be starting to work now, and it'll take time, but it'll start to work. Remember, we're aiming for our planting around Christchurch Show Weekend. Remember, that's our
So mid-November.
That's our target date. So, you know, we've just got to make sure that before then that we've got this crop so it's going to be successful, and then secondly that we can follow it up with good weed control, and then basically have it in a state ready to plant, and we'll just go in and direct drill it in there. Yep.
Okay, because we are assuming that there'll be no seeds, so any seed that was in there would have struck.
Absolutely, yep. And I mean, you know, you're not going to get any seeds from here being viable by middle of November. So it's only going to stay in a forage sense. You might get the odd seed stalk come up, but it won't be viable because it's after that time that the seed would mature. So I don't see any issue with it other than just leaving it to bulk up as feed for you know, a bit of additional silage.
Time frame between putting the Roundup on and sowing?
Probably want, I mean, if we use one of the high octane Roundups, like the 540 Transorb or something like that, then we're probably looking at sort of 7 days. Bear in mind that we'll have harvested this off, and you'll want to get a little bit of regrowth on the grass and then zap it.
Now, the other
sorry, Rob, the other alternative is we could look at this, just depends, closer to the time, we'll have another session out here, and we'll see how high the crop gets. Some people will go in and round up prior to cutting. Okay, so we could go in and we could, if we're going to make it into the silage, we could go in and round up it and leave it for 24 hours and then cut the silage. And Bob's your auntie, she's all dead once it's all come off.
Sort of like standing hay.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's quite a common practice. In fact, what it does do also is it increases the sugars in the plant. So as a consequence of, it just increases the palatability a bit. So a lot of people do it.
The interesting thing I was going to mention was the fact that the owner of this paddock reckons that they'll get enough return from these oats to pay for all the development of the paddock.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, whether they sell oat and silage, or or oat and hay, or whichever they want to make of it, probably silage. I mean, there'll be a significant number of bales on here. And I would suggest that the way it's looking, there's no reason why it can't be at a level of maybe 4 or 5 tonne to the hectare by the time we come to cut it in middle of, in early November. So I sort of think our cutting date's probably going to be that right at the beginning of November, and then that's going to give us 10 days to control and apply herbicide, and then come straight in and direct drill into it.
And then we've got probably 1 or 2 cuts at the end of the season.
Of lucerne?
Yeah.
Probably, yes. I would suggest you're probably going to get... Look, you'll get one definitely. You might sneak another one in the mid-autumn. But, yeah. The only thing we've got to be careful of with the lucerne in that first year is we've got to make sure that we let it go to flower. And you want to let it certainly go to flower, because that will allow the plant to build up its root reserves. Okay, so it'll build up its root reserves, and then when we go into winter, it's got enough in its roots to enable it to continue to survive and progress for the next year. I mean, if we thrash it, we could impact persistence, but especially when you've got a young plant that'll be flat out trying to put its root down, into the soil and seek moisture, and we've just got to be careful there that we don't, in in the interest of greed, perhaps take another short-term cut of jolly lucerne hay, but compromise perhaps long-term persistence. I think that's the only thing.
It's the goose that lays the golden egg, isn't it?
Well, it is a bit, and I mean, you know, we're talking about a perennial pasture, a perennial crop, okay? So lucerne's perennial, so, you know, the roots will go down several metres, so we've got to let that root establish, and then we've got sort of 3 to 4 cuts a year, every year, the following years, you know, so we'll be pretty much right. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm really happy, Rob. I'd have to say that, you know, we got it planted probably a bit later than ideal, but it's looking really good, a great establishment, a very good, you know, and overall, I think the crop's just sitting here ready to take off, and you won't know it in another month. If we get a bit of nitrogen on it, you won't know it. It'll be really going great guns.
And that nitrogen has gone on, and what the story is literally that oat crop will pay for all the development up right through until the establishment of the lucerne, and from then on, not the first year, but from then on, about 10 to 12 grand off 5 acres. It makes a bit of sense, doesn't it? But you probably do need just a touch of irrigation, and we're talking irrigation straight after the break. Back to Rob's Country. Well, you guys predicted September you'd be into it, and by gosh, you are into it.
Yep, certainly are. Yep, the irrigation season's well underway now. Particularly for those guys that are on a rotation of any sort of irrigation and on the lighter soils, they really should have just about done a lap now, if you like, or a full rotation. If not, they'll probably be classed as being behind the 8 ball.
And it's going to catch up. Well, you're never going to catch up, is what I was going to say.
That's right. Yep. You're going to need some a reasonable amount of rain, an inch of rain, 20 mils of rain or something like that, just to help you out. But then you shouldn't really be stopping. You should just be carrying on, and that's just a bit of a bonus. So you've caught up.
Phil, it's very important, I would imagine, to keep monitoring, because I know you guys do probes into the ground so you can see. It's very important to use that technology.
Yes. Whatever you use, whether it's our services or the telemetry. Soil moisture sensors, but yes, very important, especially this time of the year. Soil temperatures are still around that 10 degrees. I mean, it was under 10 degrees this morning. Didn't get above 10 degrees at lunchtime today. So, yeah.
But a couple of nor'westers, and other parts of the country will be higher than that. Yeah.
Up in North Island, they've had a very good season leading up. The Hawke's Bay is in good condition at the moment. Pukekari is very wet. Had a lot of rain. So there's no pressure there, and if we can, I'll take the prompt. But if we can go to the graph.
Yep, absolutely. Let's have a look at the graph. So that's the blue line. You've come a long way below the median point there, haven't you?
Yeah, the median point. If you look, we actually predicted that he should have irrigated on the 14th September, but didn't actually get there till the 17th. So only about it was 3 days behind. But this time of the year, with the soil temperatures and that, it's probably not going to affect your yields too much.
We've got that red line at the bottom, which is that one there.
That's the level you should be trying to keep above. So he's just popped down below that. Just didn't quite get on there early enough. It's popped up again. I think he's trying to put
the green line above it is, what does that mean?
That's his pivot operating range. So that's his minimum. He should actually. This is the stress level here. The red one is the stress level. The green one is the operating level, so he should actually be operating between those two green lines. So he's missed by a bit. And we'll see what happens over the weekend. So we're predicting now that he needs to irrigate this particular spot again on the 24th September, which gives us the weekend to see if we get that rain or not.
Bottom line is, you've got to be on top of irrigation if you're making it work.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Good, because, I mean, and that comes back to the monitoring, and it also, just because we've had a few sou'westers and a bit of rain doesn't mean to say that it was good.
No, certainly not. No, it's this. I mean, this period. The period now is critical. If you get behind, I mean, as you said, you're going to stay behind. You're going to get some yield issues.
Yep.
You're not going to get up there. So the arable farmers, particularly those growing fescues and ryegrass, they may have needed to irrigate by now. Again, washing fertiliser in. But apart from that, they're still ticking on quite nicely.
Looking out further, Phil, we used to talk about sacrificing crops. You'd use irrigation to get them up, and then you'd end up saying, look, I can't get water onto everything. So sort of looking down that road again, aren't we, this year?
Those that potentially, yep. If we carry on with the same pattern that of weather that we've got so far, there's potential for people to, you'll have to just skip crops if possible.
That's tough, isn't it? I mean, I'm just sort of thinking of a farmer sitting there and he or she be going, well, I've got to change my budgets because that crop's not going to be producing.
That's right, and that's where it's really important to monitor soil moisture as well. So then you know if which crops you can, in part, skip if necessary.
Yep.
If you can get around on a quick rotation or something like that and get back, or if you've got the deeper soils especially.
And as far as the pastoral guys are concerned, you just got to keep at it the whole time.
Yes, you do, but strategically as well. I mean, at the moment, there's that magic 10 degrees where the soil temperature's not up to that 10 degrees. Mm-hmm. Once it gets above that 10 degrees, things are going to really
crack on.
Really crack
we can
on.
all west is filling me about 12, 15. Thank you very much indeed.
Right.
After the break, we've got to be talking federated farmers in general, but bees in particular. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Interesting season. We've just been talking about soil temperatures and lack of rain, but we've had a lot of cold, overcast days.
Yeah, we have, Rob. It's been very testing, you could say, for the beekeepers out there. We're just in the present point in time of trying to get our hives up to strength and actually make nukes that we can raise queens off our strong hives, but we're finding it pretty hard to make the nukes off because some of the hives are not as strong as they probably should be at this time of the year, and we've sort of put it down to the weather we had back in the autumn time. The rain that we had, it sort of, I think they've lost a chance to get out and get a good dose of pollen, and they've lost that cycle of bees basically, and they've lost their winter bees sort of earlier on, and they're just sort of struggling a bit at this stage. But yeah, if we get some, we've had a bit of fine weather, but we just need a bit more of it.
Because bees don't come out unless it's fine, do they?
Yeah, they sort of, the optimum temperature is sort of 10 degrees that people talk about, but it depends on what's flowering and what sort of honey flow they have been on. That sort of varies a bit from year to year, well, from the time of the year, sorry.
You've got gorse and broom, you've got tree lucerne, and I get ko-fi?
Yeah, that's and the wattles are out also as well. Have been out. So, but the main thing they're getting at the moment is gorse. But I mean, you can see around the countryside, it's becoming less and less, which becomes a bit of a problem. And we've sort of this season we've started feeding a lot more pollen supplement to our hives, just to basically to fill that gap. So, which is a bit of another cost to us, but. Yeah, it's something that you have to do. Yeah, that's dead
Tell
right.
me about pollination, because that's becoming a big part.
Yes, so at this time of the year, most of the farmers out there will know what seed crops that they're going to grow and that will require beehives. So I'd sort of urge the farmers to talk to their beekeepers and shore up numbers about how many hives they want and also what they're growing. And because it's if a beekeeper doesn't have enough hives or whatever, he can look at maybe splitting a few and increasing a few now, and it's easier to do it now than a week before the crop is flowering.
Yeah, right. What's the rule of thumb to work out how many you're going to need? I mean, if you've got a paddock of
so what we work on is radish seed is usually about the top end guys probably use about 4 to 5 hives to hectare, but, and you can use anywhere between, some people use 2.5, it just depends on sort of permanent sites that are also around the farm, and the carrot seeds are used at 8 hives to hectare, so that's a pretty standard
so just
standard number.
there are sort of ratios, there's sort of systems plates, whatever.
Yeah, and most beekeepers will work it out on in that area where the radishes or whatever is growing. They'll roughly know what permanent hives, sites of hives that are around, and they'll sort of equate that into the equation of when they're working out how many they think the farmer might need. But it's also depending on what the farmer also wants to pay.
Yeah, well, that's true, because that is a pay thing.
It is, yeah, absolutely. So,
Manuka stands, you've talked about people sowing Manuka rather than actually cutting it out.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's a big thing on the North Island now to definitely plant a lot of Manuka and to get on the bandwagon, so to speak, of the high value Manuka honey. So the Manuka standards came out just a couple of months ago, and just to basically tidy up the industry, so to speak. But yeah, it's interesting reading the facts that we had, and yeah, there's going to be some big changes to do with labelling and stuff like that. But the guidelines that they've got at the moment don't come until January 2016. So people have got a bit of time to reword their labels and that sort of thing. So the interesting thing I found while reading it was that the MPI have been in the consultation process, but they've actually said what you can't do, but they haven't said what you can do. So which is very interesting.
So things looking pretty good?
Yeah, if we can get a decent couple of weeks of weather now for the hives and stuff like that to build up, then it'll save us a lot of work further down the track.
Sounds good. Barry, thank you very much indeed. Now, Federated Farmers' phone number and others you'll want to jot down on your screen now. Williams, you've either been watching or you have just missed Rob's Country, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.